Hey everyone, and welcome back to another news roundup. And today it's a really damn interesting one. And of course, if you missed out on yesterday's Sekiro video, you really gotta check it out. That game is so damn interesting. I think you'll love the video. So, let's get into the news. Do you want Gaben to use his transcranial magnetic stimulator on you? Well, it's hard to say either way, but that is in principle one of the things that Valve's principal experimental psychologist talked about during Game Developers Conference. Now, he was giving a talk on the Vision series of panels, and he was focused, of course, on player psychology and how deeper analysis could be used to tailor rewards to players. Now, his analogy to all this was actually quite fantastic. He said that when you're talking to somebody, your tone and your gestures are like the overt things, right, that you use to convey your point. But there's a lot more that you don't really control, like the tension of the muscles in your eyes, the micro expressions on your face, all that stuff where if you freeze frame this video, makes me look a bit stupid. Basically, all that non-verbal communication. Now, he said that when players are using a gamepad, it's a bit like only having a small part of the puzzle. It's a bit like listening to somebody over VoIP. This is my analogy. It's a bit like listening to somebody over VoIP instead of hearing them talk in person. You just don't get the full picture. So this sparked off a wild ride during his talk about deeper player analysis. So that could be using brain imaging to see what's going on under the hood, having eye tracking, but perhaps with more details, such that it could maybe get more data from your eyes, like the muscle tension. Basically, if devs had all of those data points, it could open up game rewards that are more tailored to the player, or I think what is maybe a bit more interesting for me, gameplay loops that are a lot more engaging for each user, so balancing the rate of enemies. And that's actually something that's kind of been tested with a horror game, I believe a few years back, that actually knew what your heart rate was. Now, this stuff to me is interesting academically, and I think designers probably could learn a lot from, say, doing a lab session with their game as a part of the user testing for their game. But past that, it's uncomfortable, isn't it? It's mighty uncomfortable, especially when you know this stuff would be just instantly applied to the reward loop. I mean, come on, what if a mobile game knows the flow rate of blood through your finger, and that is tech that phones currently use for their finger unlocks, or at least one type of finger unlock? Well, they maybe use that to work out your stress levels, therefore get your engagement, and then tailor the pacing of pop-up video adverts based on that. Maybe tailoring, say, when a discounted loot box pops up on the screen. This stuff could be used to work out when people are the least able to resist a purchase and then target purchases at them in that specific moment. Basically, there is a big potential for downright evil here. So while it may be interesting, and I think is interesting, on the level of design, maybe leveling or, measuring the just intensity of a shooter and how that applies to people, well, it could actually instead be used as a force multiplier for the influence of in-game purchases, which is a bit of a dark future. Now, on the bright side, he did talk about transcranial magnetic stimulation, something that right now is used to treat a number of conditions. Basically, your brain, it's a big manipulatable slime ball. Now, in other fields, you can, say, apply the right electrical stimulation to a part of the brain and get pretty much the expected result. Well, with TMS, they actually talked about a lot more, letting you see with predator vision, creating taste sensations, things like that. Now, that all is extremely far out, but I don't think it's absurd to say that it is very possible. A lot can happen in 20 to 30 years. We all know where our industry was 30 years ago and how it has progressed. Here's the thing, that tech is going to advance a lot over the next 20 years because of medical funding, which is a very big source of funding, and that will end up getting to the state where it can be commercialized. So I suppose I'm partially excited about the possibilities of being able to use that research for good, but I'm also very deeply worried about influencing people and brain overstimulation, because I think overstimulation is a massive problem in society right now. I even see it with people who are 4 or 5 years younger than me, and I'm 24, right? Like, I actually feel a generation apart from, say, a 19-year-old that I'll meet. A lot of that's just because I came on to using phones later than they did, and it's just very fundamentally different. So yes, I am very worried about a time where, just all of the tech companies are so good at targeting people that we just have these overstimulated brains and, thoughts philosophically and free will aside, let's just say we could all be a lot more hijacked than we currently are, and I think that's kind of worrying. But anyway, I would say expect to see this stuff creep in over the next 20 years. Next though, the PS State of Play. Sony hold the State of Play. It was VR focused with no major announcements, so it was pretty underwhelming, but it stands for something a lot more important, because it followed the Nintendo Direct style of presentation. It was a games focused presentation that was direct to consumer in its design, and that is a far cry from the traditional Games Expo method of AAA marketing, where companies would always have their messages filtered through the press, who of course at that time were the people with the audience. With events like this, we see companies bypass the press, focusing on really two main things broadly. Number one, a direct relationship with the customer, and number two, influencers. Okay, less so influencers with Sony, but I think it's a pretty clear trend overall. Traditional press is less relevant, it's going down, new media is rising up, and companies are finally understanding that their customers would rather just see a slick presentation full of games, and that oddly enough, that will humanize the company more to their players than a bunch of, people in suits surrounded by cars and footballers. Overall, I think this is going to be a detriment to the press release repost side of the games industry press. Indeed, I think we know that. We've seen a rise of op-ed style content from the websites, which is a mixed bag admittedly. It could also see that side of the industry push towards true journalism when they actually need to make the story. Look at what Jason Schreier does. He goes out there, he finds sources, he gets them on record, and he produces outstanding investigative content. Thoughts on Jason as a person aside, I think we can all agree he does produce excellent work. So there you go. I suppose it's just interesting to see the various cogs that make up the machine of this industry adapt and change over time with trends. Next, though, Bethesda has committed to Steam. Yeah, we've got another storefront update. Come on, we couldn't have an episode of the news without one. Bethesda have decided to bring Fallout 76 over to Steam, and they have confirmed that much of their future lineup, like Doom Eternal, Rage 2, and the next Wolfenstein, will come to Steam as well. It's nice to see the customers are going to have the choice here, but it's worth looking into why this was done. You see, the 76 decision being on the Bethesda store, that was made before Steam unveiled its new tiered revenue split system. With it in effect, money over 10 million in total revenue is at the regular 30% split, between 10 and 50 million is at 25, and 50 million and above is at 20% revenue split. Now that's all a lot worse than the Epic Games Store's flat 88%, but it is a lot better, seemingly enough to have Bethesda be comfortable with it. And after all, it's all a lot better than the maybe 55% that they'd be able to get through retail sales. Being a large publisher, of course, their games will likely all get to that 20% tier. After all, $50 million in sales at $60 is 833,000 copies, which is a pretty low number for the likes of Wolfenstein, Doom, and any Bethesda Softworks title, maybe with the exception of 76, which I don't think sold that well. As for Rage 2, well, I don't actually see that much excitement for it out there, although I will admit that the gameplay looks pretty fun. Next, though, we've got to talk about something that's actually dead interesting, especially to me. Apple have announced a premium game subscription service. It costs $10 per month, and it gives you access to 100 plus games across all Apple devices. It's not out yet, but it will be, I think, this year. It's extremely interesting for a number of points. Number one, it includes macOS. But that is actually in line with Marzipan, which is their upcoming system that will allow iOS apps to run natively on macOS. And from following the works of, say, Steve Troughton-Smith on Twitter, who's a fantastic developer, it seems like Marzipan is actually quite fantastic. Now, what's interesting is how this has been positioned. They opened by talking about how free-to-play with in-app purchases is doing very well in the current market. But then they talked about the quality and the creativity and the artistic nature of premium games, but said that they don't do particularly well these days. And they essentially positioned their arcade subscription service as a solution to this problem, being a platform for premium sort of artistic games like, say, Monument Valley 2, along with them announcing a number of new titles, including the sequel to Beneath a Steel Sky, which coincidentally, a friend and other Northern Irish game studio owner is actually working on, so congratulations, Kevin. Anyway, so running a studio of my own and working on a title that you guys haven't seen, but will run on everything and is very narratively focused, it's an interesting prospect, so I'll definitely get in touch with them. Now, I know that this is not what the core audience of this channel will love to hear, especially given the common thoughts on Apple, at least for my fellow PC builders, but this could end up being a very viable solution for having high-quality mobile content that respects the player, but is also financially viable, which is a problem. Of course, it could be bad for those who don't get in the program, so it's not all sunshine and roses. Additionally, we need to see how they're going to handle things like platform exclusivity. Will it be there? Will it be mobile only? Will it be timed? Are there multiple tiers of partnership? All those things are going to be key, both for customers and then those of us who are making content and could be interested in being on the Apple Arcade. Plus, will we actually see returns? Or will we see massive player counts, but with a tiny amount of revenue per player? It is hard to tell at this stage, but it's an industry shakeup that, while it maybe doesn't affect the core PC players, it does affect premium art, narrative-driven games, and that is, I think, a sector of the industry that we all do want to see continue to be healthy. And next, let's talk about No Man's Sky. First up, that video from a while back, it's the largest on the channel. It's just been performing like an absolute champion, so it seems like people really do want this game to turn out well, which is kind of nice. So, they have announced that VR is going to be a part of No Man's Sky Beyond, and from the trailer it looks great. Now, I have a Vive, I've had an Oculus DK2 since shortly after launch. I absolutely love VR, although I do know it's very niche. As for No Man's Sky, I actually think it's quite well suited to VR. First, flying. Anything in a cockpit works great in VR, but they would need to tighten up their flight model. Next, traversal can be rather troublesome in VR, but creative stuff is great because it's really tactile, so the mining and the building would actually feel quite great in VR. Now, this is not going to set the world on fire like the No Man's Sky Online announcement, but it is another welcome addition to a game that has done really a remarkable job of redeeming itself and being made by a studio that did decide not to take the money and run. Next, Sony and the war in retail. This is not a hammer blow, but it is rather large. They are pulling downloadable code sales from retailers. Now, this is rather large as it basically does prevent third-party key sales. All digital sales will be through the PS Store, and that will be it. This cuts out the secondary market that I think for Sony is bad for business, and it removes a revenue stream from many key resellers, including the likes of, say, UK's Game and the US's GameStop, who both sell game keys online, from what I understand. Now, this was an increasingly important part of their business because of the decline of retail game sales, and it means that those companies, as an example, they could launch their own promotion for a PS Store game to drum up interest. Well, with this, Sony will have a complete monopoly on PS Store sales, they will have full control over game offers and all that stuff. For them, it makes sense. They have more control, and I suspect they are okay with damaging these major retail sector companies. They don't seem like much of a friend to Sony. Sony would far rather their first-party titles be sold on their own digital store so they can get all the money, and they'd far rather third-party sales were sold on their store so they can get the 30% cut, both being far more lucrative than sales through the traditional retail model. Finally, we actually have some great news to end this on. It's an update on Halo. So, months ago, the Halo Online project was put on hold by Microsoft. Note, on hold, not halted. Microsoft certainly seemed to appreciate the efforts of the team to bring the Halo multiplayer experience to PC, and interestingly, they did not go as hard against them as they could have. Well, the team behind Halo Online have posted an update. A few days after the release of version 0.6 of the project, a few of their team met with key 343 staff, including Frank O'Connor, the franchise development director of Halo. Of course, they requested the development on Halo Online was paused, and Microsoft's post ended up saying this: "One thing remains clear, the community really wants more Halo on PC. As we look ahead, we are very excited about the prospects of an official classic Halo experience making its way to PC, and we hope to be able to partner with the team and broader mod and content creation community to help inform the types of experiences and features our fans desire. While we have nothing to announce today, please know that the PC community is very important to us and top of mind as we work towards the future." Now, of course, they would go on to announce Master Chief Collection on PC, starting of course with Halo Reach. According to 343, the existence of Halo Online lit a spark, and the quote is that it kicked them in the pants, actually bumping Halo Master Chief Collection on PC up the priority list, being responsible for us seeing its announcement so soon. So they continue to talk with the main Halo studio, 343, but we're not working on the project from a technical aspect, given of course how they're modders, and really modders are not needed at the time when they're just trying to get Reach working, and that is something that they italicized on their blog, noting that modding is actually on the roadmap for MCC and PC. 343 have said that they are interested in working with modders, including the Halo Online team and other people, to explore options for official mod support. It, along with Forge Mode, won't be there for launch, but it is something that 343 do want to deliver. Now, the mod team is doing more of 343, but they're not able to say what it is yet, and they do also seem to have great relations with 343 and are continuing to exist and work. They have said that their team is not going anywhere. They've said that we will see a lot more from them in the future. And you know what? I'm mostly including this story in the video because it's good to champion companies doing something right. It seems like Microsoft really did respect the team's work, and they didn't tell them to stop development and destroy their code, they just said to pause, and they engaged with them after that. Master Chief Collection on PC seems to be just an all-around success story, one that was sparked by a company understanding the desires of its community and actually partnering with celebrated members of that community to bring the whole thing to life. It's rare to see that from big companies, especially those as big as Microsoft, so when we do see it, I think, yeah, we need to say that this is what we want to hear, and we need to encourage that to happen more in the future. I think a lot of companies would do a lot better if they had more genuine conversations with their users. Yeah, being a World of Warcraft YouTuber, I really do believe that. I mean, especially since I've heard about the uselessness of some summits they've done in the past, so, ugh. But, I mean, hey, Anthem would have been a bit more good if Anthem, had involved more talking with people who actually play loot shooters. So when you see Microsoft do this, it's worth saying, hey, Microsoft, well done, more of that in the future. Talk with your users. Turns out they actually know quite a lot. So there you go, that is it for today's episode of the news. There will be a lot more content coming out on this channel over the next week. Editor's just back from holiday, so we'll be able to ramp up production again, which I'm really excited for. And of course, the Sekiro video from yesterday. Man, I love that game. I think you'd really enjoy the video. So thank you very much for watching, guys. And with that, I'll see you next time.